Welcome to the show called Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. This is the show where we talk about everything homeschooling, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We want to affirm and encourage you in the decision to homeschool, challenge and inspire you to take it to new heights, and celebrate everything you get to experience along the way in this adventure of a lifetime. I'm your host, Davis Carman, and I want to remind you, our listening audience, that you can now watch us on YouTube. We've been doing this for about a year, or you can continue listening on your favorite podcast app. Today's show is titled Unbound, and our guest is Jonathan Brush. So Jonathan, let's talk homeschool. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I've used a lot of Apologia curriculum for my own children, so it's kind of a cool association to be on the podcast. So.
Well, great. Well, I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Let's start by making sure our audience knows a little bit about you, maybe a little bit about Unbound. So give us a quick intro to who you are and what Unbound does.
Well, I get to be the beneficiary of standing on the shoulders of a lot of giants. And so I'm not sure how, but my mom learned about homeschooling back when I was just completing first grade. So I was homeschooled from that point forward. And so I got to do the kind of non-traditional education thing. I was the first homeschooled student admitted to the college I attended. So that I did kind of a traditional homeschool thing, a traditional education thing. Then I went to work for that college when I graduated, so sort of stayed inside the traditional education sphere for a while. And then I got some real concerns about traditional education, and so that moved me to non-traditional stuff, which eventually led to being able to have this really cool position running Unbound, which has been one of the chief blessings in my life. I have 8 children, and we've homeschooled them. Some of the little ones are still going through that, but 4 have graduated. And so we've gotten to experience some pretty cool sides of that. And my wife was also homeschooled. So we're pretty well saturated with that kind of idea. And it's been an amazing blessing and something that we've benefited from lots of folks, including people who write Apologia curriculum throughout the years.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I am relatively familiar with Unbound. I remember being introduced to it when our kids were just starting the college search process. But I don't know you very well. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and hearing more of your heart and how God has used you through Unbound. So tell us a little bit about the origin story of Unbound. What inspired you to get involved and to get that going, and how has that played into your own personal journey?
Yeah, so I think there's a neat story here. I like origin stories, and I like to be able to recount, and I also like to sort of make sure that we don't miss the people that laid some groundwork for us. So way back in 2003, there was a guy named Brad Voller, and Brad wanted to be a missionary in South Korea. South Koreans really set a lot of store culturally by having a degree. And so, he did some math and was like, man, if I take the time to get a degree and go into debt for that, it's going to really impact my ability to be on the mission field. And so he figured out a different, new way to earn a degree, and he did that. And unfortunately, Brad's a certified genius. And so his ability to do that was not necessarily the same as everybody else's. But everybody was really curious about it, so he wrote a book explaining how to do it. People read the book and were like, yeah, that sounds like the kind of thing a genius would do. They said, no, I think this is something everybody can do. And so he partnered up with 2 other guys, and they started a coaching program to help folks earn college degrees without debt. And so that was way back in 2003. I came on in 2010, and I'd come from this traditional education background. And so I got working with them, and then eventually ended up running their student life department, where I was getting to travel all around the country and meet some really extraordinary, exceptional students. And then nothing less than a series of miracles happened. That's kind of a long story that we could tell some other place. But in 2020, I was able to step into owning and running Unbound, which was the consumer side of what had become the company. And to me, that was a dream come true, because I loved what we were doing educationally, but I really loved the community. The students and the people I got to work with were just extraordinary. I was totally addicted. And so we got to take everything I'd learned in all my time in higher education. We had learned through running student life programs together. And, 2020, we got this little bit of a reset. There was a lot of resetting going on in 2020. And we were able to say, look, what if we could just concentrate on the stuff that we know makes a difference? Like, God's given us this opportunity to sit in the sidelines and watch all the stuff and say, that, not that, that, not that. And so we got this kind of chance to almost like relaunch everything. So we had all this history behind us. And in 2020, we got to reset. I launched a new program that we called Ascend, which is our post-high school program. After that, we developed some high school curriculum and some other things. And man, it's been a blessing. It's been exciting. It's been hard because good things are hard. That's part of what makes them good. but we continue to get to work with some extraordinary young people and get to see some amazing things. So that's our story, and it's been a God-saturated one for sure.
Thank you for sharing that. That is very fascinating to me. I love hearing people's bios and how God moves them from one place to the other. And that I'm already excited about where this conversation is going, because I remember when our kids were starting to graduate high school and we were looking at what is the next step. And I remember one of the conversations Rachel and I had was, we were so outside of the traditional ways when we homeschooled our kids. Let's make sure we don't accidentally go back into the box after they graduate high school. And so all 7 of our kids went very different and interesting paths. I told them there's nothing magical about 4 years. You got to have a degree. And they took me up on that. And so if you look at all 7 of our kids, it's very different paths they took. Turns out they all ended up getting a college degree without any debt. And so there's different levels of commitments that families make to how to make that happen. And a lot of it, I think the key word you've said is the non-traditional paths. And Unbound provides some of those solutions. So tell us about Unbound's programs and how they support some of these unique needs that homeschool students have in particular.
Sure. So let me do that by kind of telling you the 3 levels of Unbound's programs, and then let me tell you the kind of heart that sort of beats through all of them. So most people, it's not required to do this, but a lot of people are introduced to us through our course called Navigate. And Navigate is actually included in our flagship program, but it's a standalone course. It generally runs 8 weeks, and it came out of my deep frustration. I always preface this and say, look, nobody's gotten to live in a golden age post-Eden. In other words, we live in a fallen, broken world. And so there's never been a generation that hasn't had significant challenges. So young person, if you're coming out and saying, wow, the world's messed up, yes, it always has been. There's never been a point where that's not true. At the same time, it's a big, beautiful, amazing world. And it is marred by sin, but it is also redeemed by God. And so to be able to hold both of those things is really important for any generation. So we tell young people, like, yes, you have challenges. That's why God put you here. But also there's amazing opportunities. And I had this frustration. I was watching kids and parents be so stressed out about their next steps in an era where I was like, wow, like the opportunities are greater in some ways. There's still problems, but the opportunities are greater in some ways than ever have been. And so Navigate came out of my frustration with that, and then our collective experience in saying, look, I don't profess to know the answers to your life. And if anybody does, you should run screaming from them. That's not a good idea. But I can tell you that there are some questions that if you can ask them with wisdom, you will be able to navigate the big decisions in your life. And so Navigate is a standalone course that really helps students figure out what's next. And then in high school, our curriculum is non-academic. So we don't do academic subjects, but we do all the things that make the academics make sense. So time management, task management, communications, conflict resolution, leadership, responsibility, resilience, learning to deal with failure, being able to do projects and taking ideas from ideas to reality. And that curriculum is designed to integrate with any homeschool curriculum in particular. And if a student's listening to this, they're like, great, mom's going to sign me up for more work. And we know that, and the answer is yes, but our job is to make that work engaging. So as a student, when you take it, you go, oh, this will help me do science better. This will help me do my math homework better. And so that's our high school curriculum. And then our kind of flagship program is Ascend. And Ascend is a post-high school program that can go 1, 2, or 3 years. They're standalone years that work together. So it's whatever a student needs. And it can serve as a gap year. I want to take a break before I do something else and do something constructive during that time. It can stand as I don't know what to do next, so help guide me through this. So sort of like a Navigate on steroids. It can be I know I want to go to college, but I want to learn the transferable skills I don't think college will teach me. And we can help a student earn up to 90 credits, so we'll transfer into their destination school. So it can be almost a replacement for some pieces of college, or it works as a program for somebody who's going into the trades who says, I don't want a degree, but I don't want to work at Chick-fil-A for the rest of my life. How do I pick up these transferable, marketable skills? And Ascend does all of those things. So it can be a complete college replacement, or it can be a preparation for college, or it can be something that works in conjunction with college, depending on what the student needs. And often that's a process we work through with our counselors pre-enrollment. Sometimes for students, it's, I'm not sure, but I want to do something productive while I'm not being sure. And Ascend can work like that.
I tell you what, it sounds like everything you've been doing since 2020 has really provided some greatly needed resources for the high school side and the post-high school side. This is very different than my exposure to Unbound, prior to my kids graduating high school in '09. So you mentioned that the non-academic courses and the like time management and the skills that are soft, that can help you understand and appreciate and do better at the others. So in your opinion, what are the most important skills or mindsets that students need today that traditional schools might completely be overlooking?
Yeah, so I'd love to answer that question. So let me build a little bit. I'm a big, like, I like to know the ideas behind the reality, right? Like, I want to know what's driving. So yes, you need to build this building. I want to understand why you build a building this way to make it work. So let me take a quick diversion to set that up, and then answer your question directly. So we say that we train young adults to thrive, and the reason we say that is that I think we have accidentally, most of us have sort of absorbed this cultural idea of success. When I talk to parents and students and I ask what they want to do, they say some version of success, but success has been culturally defined as some a version of obtaining fame, fortune, or power. Now, just to be clear, I'm not against anybody who's listening to this becoming rich, famous, or powerful, but I am against you doing that as the end goal, because I think spiritually that is going to leave you empty. But more importantly, fame, fortune, and power are interesting because they're rare. And when we tell young people that to be successful is to be rich, famous, or powerful, most young people will get 4 to 5 years out of their last educational experience having left home and find out they're not rich, famous, or powerful. And that optimism will fade to cynicism, which will fade to bitterness, which ultimately fades to despair. And so I want to say, no, we should have a separate set of goals there. And so we say we train young adults to thrive. And I pick thrive because it sounds positive, but nobody knows exactly what it means. So it gives us a chance to define it, right? And so then coming closer to answering your question, we'd say, well, what does it mean to thrive? Well, to thrive means specifically for us, we get to, sort of pick this definition and say, this is not our idea. This is looking around and saying a reflective of reality. To thrive would mean at some level to be able to accept full responsibility for your life. I think that's what it means to become an adult. To prioritize relationships. As Christians, our reality is based on relationship in the form of the Trinity. We want you to be excellent, but we know that you don't necessarily that won't result in fame, fortune, and power, but it could. So you'd be excellent at being extraordinary at ordinary things. That's a call to everyday excellence, and you have no idea how impactful that will be. That's kind of God's business. That you know how to create value, which is deeper and more meaningful than just earning money, but you have to have an economic base. That you know how to live resiliently, which means you understand you live in a broken, busted world, but you live in hope, and in light of a hope that redeems those things, in light of eternity and for the glory of God. And so if we can help you do those things, we think that would lead to a meaningful, impactful, significant life. And so people say, okay, so you're training adults to thrive. How do we do that? We do that by helping them figure out what's next, by training them in marketable, transferable skills, and by surrounding them by an extraordinary community. And now to answer your question, those marketable, transferable skills, we know these. This isn't something Unbound invented, but it's the things that we hope happens accidentally in somebody's first job or in college or something like that. And we just want to say, let's not make this accidental. What is it? What are the transferable skills? Well, it doesn't matter what's going on with AI. It doesn't matter what job you're in. It doesn't matter what career you're working. You need to know good time management, good task management, good communication skills, good relational skills, leadership skills, the ability to accept responsibility, to know how to have resilience, to deal with failure, to understand that failure is inevitable and how to recover from that, and the ability to quickly and effectively master complicated information, which is just a really fancy way of saying how to learn new things because technology is constantly disrupting stuff. And if we can give you practical skills in that, and in Unbound, we do that through project-based education, which means we have you do real things with the possibility of real failure, then we can say with a lot of confidence, look, it doesn't matter if you're working in this kind of economy or this kind of work or doing technological stuff or you're doing blue-collar stuff or you're doing white-collar stuff. Those things are transferable between all of those things. And with that basis, you can literally go anywhere, and we can help you make those connections to make those next steps.
I tell you what, I've never heard the answer to important skills the way you just gave it. That was a great setup where you eventually led to things like time management, and communication, and relationship, and project management, things like that. but it's like the foundation prior to that were all related to your view of God. What is God calling you to do? How do you add value to this world? How do we make it a better place? How do we promote what's good and resist what's evil? And just you gave it a really good perspective that a Christian should have in all that we do, ultimately to bring glory to God. But then with those details, so I hope people listened to that answer. That was one of the best answers to listen to a couple of different times. And a word that you pulled, or that I pulled out from what you said, is the intentionality of it. Rather than letting it happen by accident, there's some intentional things that happen that get communicated. And so, yeah, audience, listen to the last 3 or 4 minutes again. That's some of the best I've heard. So Unbound is something that you mentioned, a community. So there's some level of partnership between the students and the parents and Unbound. So what does that partnership look like between the homeschool parents, the homeschool student, and Unbound's offerings and resources? What does that look like, especially to make this whole experience, the best it could possibly be?
Well, so there's a division there, right? So if we're talking about high school and things that happen pre-Ascend, our post-high school program, this is something that integrates into your curriculum. So obviously you're still the homeschool teacher. We're going to be working with you, but we can provide an extra layer of accountability. I just want to say this carefully. This is not an extra layer of parenting. That's not our job. But sometimes it's helpful, especially with older students, to have I was a homeschool student, right? So everybody's like, oh, I bet you can do anything except play hooky. And I was like, are you kidding? We're the best at playing hooky ever. I mean, like, I know exactly how to get away from my mom, get to the back 40 and say that I was, because she was on a phone call with her friend and not come back, right? And so there is some level of, at some point, it's nice to say, this is going to be done and your coach is going to be calling and you're going to be on an online meeting tomorrow. And if you're not done, you're going to get exposed for that. And so that kind of extra level of accountability. So that's how the high school programs work. We're delivering content online. We're providing a coach who's a real person, talking to them in live fashion that provides that accountability and puts a student on notice that, they're going to have to report in front of their coach and it's often in front of their peers what they did or didn't do. And if they did do it, they have to bear some of those consequences. And that can be a really good and important maturation process and learning process. For Ascend, I have to start with saying, I'm always careful to say this is not a moral or theological mandate here, but I'm struck by the fact that we have accepted as normal that students who have built relationships with their family and with their communities for a certain amount of years should, as a natural part of growing up, sever those connections and completely relocate themselves to someplace else. I'm not saying that's wrong, and I'm not saying it's beneficial. I'm merely stating that there is an extreme benefit to not severing those connections that is underrepresented. And so in Ascend, we say, look, we would love to give you an opportunity to stay embedded in your local community, stay involved with your local church, stay connected to your family, stay connected to your neighbors. Those relationships are incredibly important and incredibly valuable. And through the wonders of modern technology, I can deliver content to you online, allow you to do that. But in Ascend, I also want to give you a community that is extraordinary and will help you build community where you are, which I think is kind of the real goal that we're heading towards here. And so in Ascend, 4 times a year, we fly students to 4 different locations. Typically, that's Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Colorado, so kind of all points of the compass. They'll have a very intense week-long experience with other students. And by intense, I don't mean we make you do push-ups or make you cry or anything silly like that. By intense in that we give you real things to do that have consequences for failure and results if you get things right, and if you succeed. And what happens is when you spend that kind of intense time with people, you form really close relationships and you really connect to them. So what happens then in Ascend is like, hey, you get to stay embedded in your local community, but by the end of the first year, you can travel coast to coast and never stay in a hotel because you know students in every state and you have these really deep connections. And the things that you learn at the events, you can transfer to home and say, oh, now I know how a community works. Now I know relationships work. I can seed that here and watch it grow. And that's where I think things get really exciting and we get really passionate about that.
That reminds me a little bit of you mentioned gap years somewhere earlier in our conversation, and 4 of my 7 did a gap year, and the other 3 didn't. Like I said, there were many varieties. None of my kids looked the same. None of them were in a true traditional sense. It was a hybrid version of many different things, even after high school. So what I'd like to hear, I'm sure you got plenty of stories of real life people. So share a story with us of a student or two that who's went through Unbound and experienced the good and the bad and basically some kind of life transformation. I'm sure because I'm hearing some really good things about what Navigate and Ascend and all your resources can do to help students. So give us a couple examples and stories.
Yeah, so I like to actually connect these to real people, and sometimes you can see them on our website. And if you actually call us, we'll be happy to connect you to these real people. But one of our students is named Lily, and Lily came in and she did all 3 years of our program, but she earned the full amount of credits each of those times, and she's going to transfer those credits into a university, and she'll spend her final year on campus at that school, and then be able to move on to her next level. And for what she wants to do, she needed the degree, but she wanted the flexibility of being able to, in her case, she stayed embedded in a local community. Then she moved to a new community. And so she got to do something new. So she was not geographically bound. And yet she was able to take 90 credits with her and transfer into this school to finish out. There's a set of sisters, Abby and Shaylee. They're a really fun story. They came in really not knowing what to do and kind of reluctantly joining the program. And then it was so exciting to see them blossom and get excited. And their projects took them into places that they didn't think they could do, and they did things beyond what they thought they were capable of. And then after 1 year, they're like, man, I'm ready. And so they jumped right into the workforce. They actually, through some Unbound connections, moved to a different state. And so they got some new horizons there, and they went right to work. And so they're creating value right away. And so 1 year was enough for them to learn the transferable skills they needed to move right into the marketplace. Have a student who spent 2 years with us, and then Caleb was with us 2 years and then had some credits, but decided that his contracting work that he was doing, now he had the confidence, the ability to start his own company. So he was working for somebody else, but after 2 years, he felt like he had the leadership and responsibility experience to start his own contracting business, and had the leadership ability to do that. And so after 2 years, left to start his own business. And then my son, Braden, actually is, and there's some others like him, he did the year of the program and then went to nursing school. So in his case, he was an EMT. He had some medical background, so he was pretty confident in nursing school, but he wanted those transferable skills. And as a dad, watching Braden was really interesting because he was able to go into nursing school with so much confidence. He had the ability to do the work, to the time management, all that. But not just that, he didn't have to look for his identity in nursing school. He already had a great social network, great friends, people that prayed for him and cared for him and all those things. Now, he's done great socially in nursing school. That turned out to be no problem. But I think part of the reason he did was there was no pressure for that to work. He was in nursing school to work, to get the classes done. And along the way, he's made some great friends. But he's really been carried by his Ascend friends that he has all over the country that he still sees on a regular basis and flies out to visit and stuff like that. And so to watch him launch into professional school, and I've seen students do that with nursing school and with engineering schools and things like that. But I might finally end with this final story, which is slightly different from the professional side. And my oldest son did a year of the program, met a student there, really connected. And so they took off and had a big adventure where they left Virginia. They went up through Michigan, across the Dakotas, and across Washington State, down through California, and back home through Colorado. And so this big, huge road trip. Spent a lot of time backpacking and on a backcountry permit. But the part that always was exciting to me was that they never stayed in a hotel. They stayed with Unbound families the whole way around the country. And they were outside Yellowstone, and their car broke down. And they called me and they said, "We're broke down." I called an Unbound alum who had never met them before. And I said what's going on. He says, "Oh, it's Montana. They're right next. They're only 3.5 hours away. That's right next door to us. My cousin has a towing company. We'll tow them to our shop, and they can stay with us as long as they need until we get the car repaired and back on the road. We're actually looking forward to meeting them." And that's the kind of network that I say, has benefits for life. When you break down the middle of nowhere, Montana, you get to call alumni you've never met, and they're like, "You can stay at our house. We'll fix your car and we'll get you back on the road." And indeed, that's what happened. That's the kind of relational capital that gets developed through a program like this. That's so exciting.
That is a great story. I have to tell you a story of one of my sons too. He wanted to go on a similar adventure. We had a brother of a really close friend who lived in San Francisco, and we're in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so they wanted to go spend some time with him. He's in the pro-life ministry, and they wanted to do some things with him. And we had a beater car. It was not the best car in the world for a 3,000-mile trip. So I told them they had to get new brakes, new tires, and you got to have 2 friends go with you. And I want to see the entire travel plan. And they did something similar. They never stayed in a hotel. It was basically free other than gas the whole way out there. The guy out there checked their car, made sure there was oil in it before they made the drive all the way back. And it's a wonderful adventure. It's actually the first time I actually got involved with Twitter at the time because I wanted to keep up with them. And so if you look up hashtag that white car, you can actually see the journey of this this drive that they did back then. But that's a great story and a great adventure that your son got to go on. Thanks for sharing that. So, a lot of schools have some metrics for measuring success, whether that's GPA, graduation rates, who has a job after graduation, things like that. How does Unbound measure success? Especially, I have to think it looks different than what the traditional schools might be measuring.
Yeah, let me give you 3 answers to that. The first is when students enter Ascend, the post-high school program, they're put in a team of 8 to 10 additional students, and that team goes through the year together. The teams change every year. They involve first, second, and third year students, and they have a older student or a recent alumni as their team leader. The success of that team is measured by how many students complete the program. And so it creates this sort of elite special forces type of mentality, except for in those areas, it's like only the few survive. In this case, we say your measure of the quality of your team will be determined by how many of your students make it through this program, but we will not compromise the program 1 inch for anybody in your team. And so it creates this really tight bond on those teams, this connectedness and this desire to help everybody get through while everybody has to work hard to do that. So that's one measure of success for us. In terms of employment, we're a little bit unusual in that if you do all 3 years, it's designed so you can do 1, 2, or 3 years. But if you do all 3 years and you earn our final certificate, we grant a certificate every year. Then for the students who earn that final Ascend certificate, we guarantee employment at a level of a college graduate within 6 months of graduation, or we refund all 3 years of your tuition.
Wow.
And just to be clear, if we refunded a lot of tuition, it would put us out of business. We've never refunded $1 of tuition. We've never had anybody request that, and we've never failed to have them employed. In fact, last year we had 80 open positions after we employed all of our third-year students. And so those 2 things are kind of some measures of success. The third one is, a college or a high school, it's like your GPA. We measure things a little differently at Unbound. We're a project-based education system, which means that the heart of our program is actually doing real things. And so our first-year students have to take an idea from an idea to reality before they graduate. And their idea has to be approved by their peers, which are way tougher than we would ever be. Second-year students have to take somebody else's idea from idea to reality. And third-year students have to work in a team to take an idea from an idea to reality. And that means that after 1 year of the program, you've actually had to practice all the stuff we teach: time management, task management, project completion, overcoming failure, learning new things, working through conflict, all that stuff, in order to just complete the program. And those projects are the heart of the program. We get all kinds of exciting things. We watch kids, rebuild cars, build houses, tiny houses, start businesses, run marathons. Like there's, every year there's hundreds of projects around the country going on because of what Unbound students are doing. And that ends up being the soul of the program in the sense that, how do you define success in Unbound? Did my team make it through? And by my project, and then by my third year, what I'm doing next.
No, that's what I expected. That is a great list of key performance indicators, metrics, measures of success. So that makes total sense. And as we start wrapping this up, you got a lot of homeschool students go through Unbound, but we all know that there's a lot of changes and disruptions in education going on right now. So what trends are you seeing, and how do you think that those are going to factor into how homeschooling fits into the future of education?
Look, you can't talk about education, you can't talk about employment or anything else without saying 2 letters, AI. AI is disrupting everything on a scale that we haven't seen since computers disrupted everything, back when we were kind of coming through some of these processes, right? And so there is a positive, there's a negative to that. We have to understand as Christians live in a broken world, the negative is probably going to outweigh the positive in some ways, and yet Christ redeems all things. And so we should not approach that with fear, but we should approach that with reality. And so there's two things, we could obviously spend hours and days and weeks talking about AI, but there's two things that I'm really convinced about. The first is that those who understand how to use AI will be people who understand how to ask good questions. It's not about knowing all the answers. It's about being able to formulate the questions. We now have access to both an amazing amount of information and the ability to sort that information. But there is a human necessity to asking the questions, and that is being neglected by all these educational processes that are allowing students to either cheat using AI or they're using the teacher to create with AI. You have to start with this idea of asking questions. And one of the greatest way to ask questions is to first prioritize it, which we do in Unbound, but second, to do real projects, because you have to stop continuing and ask questions about where I'm going with that. The second is that you have to know what it means to be human. And so, I can't conceive of a reality that is not defined by my humanity, which is defined by the fact that I'm made in the image of God. And I don't meet anybody else who isn't made in the image of God. And whatever you say about AI, that's not true, and that can't be known by AI in any sense of what known means. And so consequently, students who are able to ask good questions, that covers the professional academic side of things. But students who know you don't get to choose your identity, it's given, and you've been given the best identity, you've been made in the image of God. You fully participate in a community when you serve that community. That's where project-based education comes in. And when you know how to relate to other humans and you care about other humans because you see them not as what C.S. Lewis would say as mere mortals, you've never met a mere mortal, but as immortals, and certainly in Lewis's words, everlasting splendors or immortal horrors, then that transforms everything and it puts AI back in the place it needs to be. It's technology, it's a tool, it can be a powerful one, but it is not human. And to understand those two realities and to understand how to lean into those, having good relationships is something that will take you apparently an eternity to figure out, being able to create value. I think we keep working in heaven, right? And we continue to create value, but without the imperfection of sin. And so if you can concentrate on those two things, then technology might do some weird, uncomfortable, strange, possibly damaging things, and yet we'll be prepared for it because we understand the fundamentals. And I think a lot of educational systems don't understand and grasp that.
No, I couldn't agree with you more on that in terms of AI being a big disruptor, an opportunity, but the question of what does it mean to be human is foundational to understanding the pros and cons and having good discussion on the whole topic of AI. So thank you for that. So what advice, as we start wrapping this up, what advice would you give to homeschooling families and students as they try to think outside of the box and have non-traditional educational paths? What would you say to them?
Be excited. This is we're in a wonderful world. It's broken and messed up, and there's going to be hard things in it, and yet you are made in the image of God, and that gives a worth and a weight to every moment that you are alive. And so don't miss that, and don't get stressed out about that. The way forward is not some inner knowledge. I've discovered my purpose. As Christians, we already know our purpose. It's love Lord our God with our heart, mind, and soul, and our neighbor as ourselves. So we can take that stress away from you right now, right at the end of this podcast. Instead, you're going to get to wherever you're going by doing things. And there's never been a time in history when it's been easier and more exciting to do things. So, whether you do Unbound or not, or whether you even care about anything I said or not, can I leave you with this sense of optimism and excitement just based on your identity? You're made in the image of God. And so that means you are put in this time and place for a reason. You have a purpose. There's a reason for you to be there. And that purpose is not something that you have to dig at as a mysterious thing. It's to serve God and love your neighbor. And you can start with that right now. So lean into it and get excited and do that. And then one final piece, it's never been easier to find great educational opportunities, right? You can do school from anywhere. How amazing is that? You can stay embedded in your local community and you can meet these cool people from around the country. And if, the particular brand and flavor that we're talking about appeals to you, well, then go to beunbound.us, and we'll be happy to help you learn more. But transcending that, I'd like to give you a sense of optimism, a sense of excitement, a sense of wonder that comes from knowing whose you are, and that, whatever trials and tribulations we're going through here, the end of the story.
No, that's great. So you mentioned the website. I want you to mention that again. What is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure our audience hears? I do want to make sure that they hear the website again and any other resources like that they can find you or find more information about Unbound.
I would just mention we do something different and people need to learn about it, and that's fine. So go to beunbound.us. So, the BE is the spelling there. Beunbound.us is our website. Or if you Google Be Unbound, that'll bring us up. If you want to get a flavor what the events look like, you can look for Be Unbound on YouTube and you can watch one of our wrap-up videos. And my experience is you'll go, those are my people, or those folks are crazy. And either one of those can be helpful for you, right? So check that out. Know that if you go on our site and you have questions, our people are designed and trained to talk to you. Our program is designed to take you to people that are trained to talk to you, not sell you. And so it's a disaster if we put the wrong people in our program. So we're not interested in talking you into something. We're interested in explaining what we do in a way that's helpful to you. And finally, we travel all over the country and do what we call Thrive events. And we do some live content and we do some transferable information that works for no matter what. And we teach people what Unbound does. And if you're interested in having one of those or finding one of those, contact us. If you can put a couple people in a room, we'll send somebody to do it. Or it could be that we're doing something close to you. In fact, we're coming to Charlotte in the next couple of weeks. And so, we're around the country a good bit. And if you want to see us in person, sometimes it's nice to just see a person live and go, yeah, I think they what they're saying makes sense and I'm interested in it.
No, that's great. There's nothing like a face-to-face visit to know if these are your people, to know if this is your program, to know if this is a good path for you. So,
and we're human. If you go to the website and you get the chat bot, that is actual students answering your questions. It's not AI, and it's not somebody in another country. When you chat with somebody on our website, we're real people. And so, if you come and meet us, we're real people there as well.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. This has been a great conversation, but it's time to bring it to a close. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. We hope you'll join us again next time. This has been Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. I've been your host, Davis Carman, and our guest today has been Jonathan Brush with Unbound. Have a great day, and until next time, we're walking by faith and enjoying the homeschooling adventure of a lifetime.